here with you 10 specific solutions to a conservative victory this fall in conservative governance in the United States. First, we will never apologize to the United States of America. Of reasons, not the least of which is this is the greatest station in the history of the world, and people ought to recognize it. And if the leaders of this nation don't recognize it and can't be proud of it, then who can? Right? Second, the narrative of that we're in this boat from a financial standpoint right now because of a failure of deregulation and a failure of free market capitalism is wrong, and we need to discount it. The reason we're in this boat right now is because federal regulatory mechanism was not nimble or flexible and allowed some folks to run up the middle. Weren't watching. Nobody was minding the store. And the fact of the matter is that the federal government actually distorted the free market, especially in the arena of housing. And so this narrative that deregulation failed and that free market capitalism is a failure is simply wrong, and we will not allow that to stand. Third, spending. Federal spending. You know that the annual deficits of the previous administration that you railed about and that I railed about, you know those? Remember those? The $185 and $200 billion annual deficits? Those are now the monthly deficits under these jokers. The annual deficits before are now the monthly deficits of this crowd right now. $1.6 trillion deficit scheduled for this year. That's astounding. How do you fix the spending problem? You quit feeding the beast. You turn off the spigot. It's time to fundamentally decrease spending at the federal level, and it's relatively simple to do. You just have to have the leadership and the will and the desire to do so, and that's what we committed to doing. Fourth, fundamental changes. Our federal government needs fundamental changes in so many different areas. Whether it's spending, as I mentioned, we need a spending cap without a doubt. Whether it's a balanced budget amendment that I support, whether it's fundamental tax reform or Social Security reform or Medicare and Medicaid reform, all of those things need fundamental changes for a nation of 300 million individuals so that we put in place the incentives that will allow the greatest opportunity and for folks to succeed. In the area of tax reform, we need fundamental tax reform. I believe that needs to be the fair tax. Yeah. We need to do away with the American people are smart. We need to stop making promises that we can't keep. We need to have an adult conversation about the challenges that we face, the dangers in the real world, and then take that message to the people, because they will support folks who stand up and represent them responsibly. Sixth, earmark reform. Pork projects. Pork projects, earmark reform. Earmarks are the gateway drug to fiscal irresponsibility. And they've got to end. So I stand before you proudly to tell you that we have had huge progress in the House of Representatives on the Republican side. About 3 weeks ago, our conference, the Republican conference, in a virtually unanimous vote, decided that we would not participate in the earmarking process this year. That's huge. That's huge. It's important that you know that, because you need to know that folks have gotten the message. You've sent folks like me and others to Congress who have said it's time to wake up. It's time to be responsible. Earmark reform. Efficiencies and privatization. We ought not get off that bandwagon. You remember in the 90s when privatization was the order of the day? Look, the private industry, private markets can take care of things much better than the public arena. And we ought not discount that. You ought not shy away from that. Fannie and Freddie ought to be privatized over a period of time. You just ought not have that explicit support from the federal government, from the taxpayer. It distorts the marketplace and destroys the incentives for work and enterprise. Welfare reform. Did welfare reform in '96, you remember? Provided a greater incentive to go back to work. What did these jokers do? The first thing they did when they came in with the stimulus bill, they destroyed that reform. So now there are greater incentives to stay on welfare than there are to go to work. Once again, that's destructive not just to the body politic, not just to the economy. It's destructive to people's lives and and we need to reform that. Education. We're at right now at a point where we've had a 40-year experiment that says that you can send kids to school and not teach them what it means to be an American and think that they get it. Right? We need fundamental education reform that harkens back and recognizes the fact that we are the greatest nation in the history of the world, and we are because of some founding principles and set of principles, the Constitution and rule of law that we follow. And we need to teach that to our young people over and over and over, so that we never have a president again who stands up and says that he's not proud of being an American, or doesn't have in his or her guts the wonderful beauty and awe that it is to be an American. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. We've got to teach that to our kids. 10, finally, we need a change in leadership. We need a change in leadership. In your lives and everything that you do, leadership is the key. All of your businesses, in your family, leadership is the key. We cannot run this country with the kind of leadership that we currently have. And so we need an absolute fundamental change in leadership, and you and I recognize that. The American people now recognize it. The folks in the 4th District recognize it. You think about this. You think about a member of the United States House of Representatives who made the statements that he just made about Guam. I got a few ideas about what ought to be capsized.